welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. One rule, we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, get the word out to your friends, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I am the Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good evening from my side. My name is Lei, and I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. I've spent pretty much the last 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry. I'm now in the U.S. as an independent analyst consultant, still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. Hey, it's World EV Day today.
Happy EV Day, Lei.
Tesla Model S Plaid just set a lap record for production EV in Nürburgring with an asterisk. New York State just announced legislation to ban sales of gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035, following California and Massachusetts. And football is back. Yay! Just some of the headlines, so I digress. But
are you ready for some football?
Hey, Brady.
The Lions, man. The Lions.
No.
Oh, my God.
So, hey, seriously, before we get into today's topics, just wanted to share again that our China EVs and More podcast reached the milestone of 1,000 episodes downloaded as of yesterday. So I'd like to thank you and everyone who's been part of this for making this possible since we began nearly 7 months ago.
Thank you, everyone. That number to us, I think, is pretty bananas because we did this sort of on a whim, right? So
yeah, that was during the early days of the Clubhouse craze.
And I had to chuckle when I read your Medium post because, yes, we've never actually met in person. You know, I knew of you from afar, and then we sat on that panel together for the AmCham Shanghai group, and I just reached out and asked, and here we are.
The rest is history, right? So, so this week, 2 topics we're following. Obviously, some updated August numbers, sales numbers for EVs. And the ongoing IAA Mobility 2021 in Munich. Let's start out with August numbers. So I guess the talk of the town is Tesla is always controversial. And the number that stood out was 1,300 units of the Model 3 domestically in August. I think that was debated quite a bit. Well, what do you say, Tu? Are you worried? Panic button time?
You know, I thought that the ratio would be probably around 2-to-1 for Model Y sales to Model 3. But, you know, if we are to believe that they push domestic deliveries to the end of the quarter, then next month should be a blowout month for Tesla. But it is concerning, and we need to look at this from a China market and then a European market and then a global market, right? So I believe there's more demand than 11,000 units a month for Tesla made in China Model 3s and Model Ys, especially with the short-range LFP battery being on the Model Y now. So I think we'll see a bump because of that. And, you know, we're getting this feedback that they fully outfitted their Shanghai Giga for export. And the good news is, glass half full, they're seeing a lot of demand outside of China, hence the 33,000 units. But once Berlin Giga comes online, that capacity is going to need to go somewhere too. So, it is a bit concerning because it's 2 months in a row. And I would have thought, okay, we'll see a bit of a step function in terms of domestic sales, but we didn't see that. So what do you think?
Yeah, the basic numbers were roughly, 30-some thousand units exported and just over 11,000. Most of it went to the Model Y for the domestic sales. So I think that ratio...
Like a 9-to-1 ratio, ratio, right?
Yeah, right. But for the export and domestic, it was, 3-to-1, right? Which was much higher than I expected. But in answering the question that I asked, my answer would be... I am not worried at all because we've seen this game play out many times this year. And it's definitely not a demand problem. For example, BYD chairman apologized for not delivering their DMI models, plug-in models. I think they have like 160,000 reportedly on order. So, and across the industry, I mean, there was, chip, we don't want to go into that, topic anymore, to tell you the truth. But, the Tesla, it's Elon's game. He tweeted, right, end of that time of the year, end of Q3, it's going to be super hardcore, right? So what I'm expecting is a flip of that ratio, 3-to-1, possibly for domestic and export. If that doesn't happen, then I would be concerned. But as of it looks now, I am not worried at all because a lot of the demand for the Model 3 overseas, right, capacity-wise. But at least, one thing that we can infer from whatever Tesla is doing in terms of production is, again, the last episode, what I said, not all chip shortages are created equal, right? And NEVs, not surprising, CPCA said close to 250,000 new energy PVs, right? Retail. Yeah. So again, when numbers come out today, most likely your time from CAAM, it's probably going to be around like 260, 270,000. Sure. In July, it was 271,000 overall NEVs. So,
monster numbers. Yeah. Numbers.
So, the near term, you're going to see the overall auto sales continue to be affected. So I feel like, the traditional ICEs are actually been affected more by the chip shortage for some reason. And had the chip shortage not been a problem, then, this year, imagine the numbers, right? It would be out of this world.
Right.
I did a bit of extrapolating. I still think my 2.8 million overall NEV sales could possibly be conservative. And, don't be surprised if it goes over to 3 million. Look at BYD, right? 60,000. Wuling with the Baojun was 40,000. That's 100,000 units.
So this is a terrific year, and it's a tipping point year for not only China but globally, I believe. Right? China allows the rest of the world to see the possibilities when the private enterprise takes over a lot of brands, a lot of vehicles, and if we take a step back and look at Tesla in China, the good thing I see, 44,000 units, right? So they're up there at the 500,000 unit annual capacity, which was a goal of theirs, right? So they are tracking at that currently. And so that's a good thing. And they have probably a year, if those numbers don't come in, like you said, completely flip-flopped for September, they have about a year or so to right the ship before Shanghai or Giga Berlin comes online and ramps. Because in the grand scheme of things, I believe Elon wanted some flexibility, export flexibility from Shanghai, because it was going to be the lowest cost country for manufacturing. And Asia is a big region. But I also believe that at least 2/3 I think 2/3 of his capacity he thought was going to come from domestic consumption or sold to domestic China. So, I think there's some good news there. Tesla's becoming much more efficient on the manufacturing side. But again, we're talking two cars that are fairly similar to each other. So not a ton of additional complexity by adding the Model Y. And again, this is a blueprint for the rest of the world to me, especially in the United States, who is probably going to sell 500,000 units of NEVs this year versus you're targeting over 3 million here in China, right? So probably million plus, 1.5 million in Europe as well. So I think there are ways to look at this besides just saying these numbers are bad or good, and indicating that Tesla's maturing, at least in China.
Yeah, but the good thing is the Model Y went back to number 3 in August, so that was good. But
yep.
Nevertheless, going forward, the competition is only going to increase. It's going to get more fierce. It's not going to let down. So we sort of see.
And let me add this, because my take on the chip shortage that's affecting the legacies a bit more than the EV startups. In my experience, the legacies will normally, and this is, Elon calling Renesas out. He's calling Bosch out, right? So the legacies will normally push supply chain issues to their suppliers because they don't have the direct relationship with these chip manufacturers. So perhaps they're not managing it on a day-to-day basis, and that's why they might be feeling the pain a bit more than an EV startup, where the purchasing teams and supplier quality teams and the materials teams are likely dealing with the chip manufacturers directly. So there could be a bit of that going on as well.
Yeah, so what I was alluding to was the competition, and for September, there's no question in my mind that this domestic and export ratio would be flipped. But by how much, and what would be the right level for Tesla to have any kind of sustainable level of trajectory for us to say this is healthy? I said if it can get to 3-to-1 again, 30,000 units in China in 1 month, then that to me is that would be a win.
Yeah.
But if not, then we might, be a little worried.
I look at it just a bit more simply. If we're not worried about monthly numbers, quarterly numbers, let's just say, because we're talking 3 months. I would just look at it and say, overall, is Tesla, is NIO, is XPeng, is Li Auto, is BYD growing faster than the market? We know that the market is growing substantially, 3 million units. 2.8 million units, 3.2 million units. So are these individual car companies or EV manufacturers, smart EV companies, are they growing faster than the market? That's healthy to me. If not, then it is worrisome, right? But it also means that they're probably not reacting well to the increased competition. They're probably not adjusting their customer acquisition costs because there's more products, more brands, and marketing messages get drowned out because there's so much. And so, legacy automakers know that, okay, the best time for us is new product launch, right? We spend a bunch of upfront costs on marketing and promotion, but we normally get a sales bump, right? And so, and that normally happens in a normal cycle. But with these smart EV companies, there seems to be a major announcement, either software related or product related or non-core competence product related with XPeng this week, but we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
so and that's where it's a little bit weird.
Yeah, and from a seasonal point of view, June, July, August used to be the slow months, and it is for traditional vehicles. But if we see the overall trajectory of NEV sales, then there was not a so-called a peak or a valley. It was just maintaining at a very high level, And September should be another, blowout month for many of these players, if not Tesla, So we should be expecting some huge numbers. I mean, August was already, like 60,000 out of 66,000 of BYD sales were NEVs. And, BYD alone had like 4 models in the top 10 NEV sellers. So, yeah, this is amazing to see.
Want to move on to IAA mobility?
Sure.
What were your biggest standout announcements? Because let me offer a bit of background. So I've never been, so you tell me, Lei, after I make a brief introduction on this. IAA Mobility is the Frankfurt Motor Show rebranded and taken out of Frankfurt and placed into Munich. And last year, the Frankfurt Motor Show was canceled because of COVID. So this is the first year in almost 2 years that there's been a major A-level motor show in Europe. And so this is obviously an opportunity for the German and European car makers to showcase what they've been working on over the last 24 months outside of the regular cycle of announcements and product launches that they have. So what stood out for you?
Well, what definitely stood out for me was I think there were more bikes showing than cars.
Right.
Once you add that word mobility into IAA, I think that was the whole, how the organizers or at least the German industry tried to, the way to rebrand it and also to have these open outdoor open exhibition areas is sort of changed the what we know as a motor show, right? You and I have been to, and just the historical context. I was at the 2009 IAA. That was the last major international motor show outside of China held before the pandemic. And IAA Mobility 2021 is the major international motor show held in person since the pandemic started. So there's a lot of anticipation. To tell you the truth, if back in 2019, what I remember was obviously the Mercedes had the Vision EQS, right?
Yep.
And Volkswagen had the global premiere of the ID3. That's 2 years ago, and some of these products are on the market, right? EQS has been just launched recently, right? And this is traditionally a German, centric. It's their home court. So basically, if you look at all the new global premieres this year, it's Volkswagen, right? It's Mercedes, it's BMW, it's Porsche. Audi actually didn't have any new global premieres
just that
announced at the show. The Grand Sphere was announced a couple of days before the show. So, and other than that, Renault had the Megane E-Tech, and then there were a few Chinese players who were either directly participated or indirectly participated. Case
just outside.
Yeah. Example being NIO with their robotaxi announcement with Mobileye and Intel, right? So the NIO actually participated. And
so NIO effectively said they're getting into fleet vehicles now.
Right.
So.
And I think one of the biggest models that was anticipated was the new Smart. Right? That was a huge model because they finally showed the concept, near production concept, since the Geely Daimler joint venture in March 2019. And to tell you the truth, I thought that was the smartest. From a design point of view, there was Mercedes-Benz written all over it. And I just saw one of those original Smarts driving around a couple of days ago, and I loved it. Like I love the original Smart. So this new Smart, I think people are going to get used to. And remember 4 years ago, I also went to the IAA in Frankfurt. That was where they announced that Smart would be the first electric brand from the Daimler, brand cluster to go fully electric by 2022. And the way they named the concept, it's called Concept #1 instead of Concept #1. And supposedly this deals with, how social media works, like Twitter, you put hashtag, right? That was the naming convention behind it. And so there was still these new models, but I guess, for Mercedes, it was obviously the expansion of their EQ series into all of their sub-brands, G-Class, AMG, right?
E-Class.
Maybach EQS, funny looking SUV, right? And then Volkswagen, basically, I think that with the ID Life, is looking at a 20,000 euro, urban EV market. Mm-hmm. But that's 4 years away. It's for 2025.
Which is forever. Yeah,
so that's pretty much the summary of all the new models. And then Porsche with the Mission R is their focus on motorsport. So that's the Germans, but obviously we can't, the Chinese presence has been, since 2017. 2017 Chery was there, Wei was there, 19 Wei was there, and this year Wei participated again with along with Aura. I thought this year is finally kind of the breakthrough year in terms of all these EV brands going into Europe, whether starting out with Norway and now Great Wall, 2 brands from Great Wall. They're starting pre-sales of the Coffee 01 PHEV and the Aura Cat, right, later this year. And Wei is going to set up a showroom in Munich. And they're going to start deliveries in 2022. And looking back, Wei, I think they announced their ambitions to enter Europe back in 2019. They said 2021 in Europe and 2023 in North America. So I'm not sure about North America, but at least Europe, it's happening. And after, NIO, XPeng, MG, right, they're all, NIO soon is going to start deliveries in Norway. So we're starting to see these Chinese brands finally, not only, Norway is a special market, but Germany, okay. We're going to actually see these Chinese brands in the tiger's den. I don't know whether that's the right?
Well, you and I obviously are starting to see more attention being paid by European pundits for Chinese brands on social media, I think in just general news articles, because there are more than 4 or 5 now that have announced their plans to enter Europe, either via Norway. iWays is already in Germany, although they're struggling there, or they're going slow. I won't say they're struggling. They're going slow. But my take on IAA mobility, and this is why, and love your perspective as someone who's a veteran of auto shows. To me, this is why the auto show circuit is an endangered species, because it's still dominated by cars. Because mobility to me means, okay, it doesn't even have to include anything with wheels, right? It's a system. It's a transportation system. It's it's conceptual, right? But everything here is, okay, we're going to build more cars. And what was to stop you from having your own show so you didn't have to share the stage with 10, 15, 20 different brands and 100 different cars? So I don't, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox for 30 seconds here, because the other reason that makes me think that these traditional shows are still an endangered species is because, okay, every German presenter was wearing the typical uniform for a German presenter, right? White shirt, no tie, to show that they're progressive, that they're, embracing the future. And, it's basically a suit without a tie and their cap toes or their wingtips, right? So, it just goes to show that they still haven't pushed themselves out of their comfort zone. And I didn't see any concepts because you don't even have to show us that you've come close to production or commercialization of a technology, of a service, of a product. Just tell us you're thinking about this stuff. But they dug in and, poking at Tesla while you're presenting about your new technologies or how you're going to transform yourself in the future, that's just, that to me means that they're chasing the wrong thing. And, on social media, it was many German pundits that were bagging on Volkswagen and Mercedes and all that what they were doing. I do applaud that NIO is going to, alongside with Mobileye, going to launch a robotaxi service in Munich in 2022. I do applaud the announcement from Volkswagen that Argo is going to start or testing the ID Buzz, right, for their robotaxi service. But, I don't know. This show doesn't move the needle for any of them, and BMW seems kind of like a mess. I think they're lucky to be in their home market where they'll still see substantial sales, but it's just really difficult. And they seem like they're a day late and a dollar short, because to your point, in 2019, they introduced the ID3 and Volkswagen introduced the ID3 and Mercedes introduced the EQS. 2021, 2 years later, and a world of difference later, it's more of the same. So I'm jumping off my soapbox now.
Yeah, and if you look at the case of Mercedes, they announced the EQ brand at the Paris Motor Show in 2016, and I was there. They announced CASE, right? CASE, the acronym. Right. Mm-hmm. And looking back, over the last 5 years until now, I guess you can say it's a bit slow. There's some stumbling along the way. They're still stumbling a bit. All of these premium brands, BMW, Audi, and Mercedes, I think they're at least, from a China perspective, probably globally as well, that their EV models haven't met, I guess, sort of expectations. So, but at least, at this year's IAA, you can see, okay, they're committed. All of these world premieres were battery electric vehicles. There was no, right? I think they made
commitments too.
For all across the the brands that were represented, there was no ICE models talked about or debuted. So that's obviously a sign of the times, their commitment. But in execution,
and more specifically, it's China pulling them this direction, right?
Oh, China.
It's not Europe
Tesla,
and the United States doing that.
Sure.
Yeah, and Tesla.
And just the whole, European or whatever the CO2 requirements, China's requirements, just trying to compete on a different, a level. So, so there was a bit of good and bad, I guess, both ways. And if we bring politics into this, I think every year, at the Frankfurt Motor Show, Greenpeace will be there, and they would protest and for example, this year, they said, Volkswagen, you're not doing fast enough, you're not, making the transition, and Dietz he had a huge speech at one of the conferences about climate change and saying, dropping 1.5 degrees achievable. And they're moving as fast as they can. And what I thought was also interesting was German Chancellor Angela Merkel basically said during the opening that don't put your eggs in one basket. You want to, try to tap the potential of all the different innovative technologies, you
Yeah.
know, including hydrogen, right? Which, you know, Dees is not a big fan of it, but BMW is. So I'm not sure how he would react, you know, when she said that. So it's always interesting for you know, seeing, and now with her, you know, right, her term over, right, the next.
There will be some uncertainty about upheaval in Germany over the next few years because there's new leadership, because the main driver, or one of the main drivers in their premier industry, are playing catch up now to non-European companies. So,
but you know, if I was Dees, you know, I would boast that, you know, hey, we did get the level 4 autonomous driving law into place, right? Hence, we can do the Neo Mobileye robotaxi in Munich.
mm-hmm.
I think Angela Merkel or actually Dees, you know, on the Volkswagen usually hold a group night right before the show starts.
Yep.
And this time he had a kind of a Q&A session or a fireside chat with Brian Selesky. And his position was EVs were just a matter of changing the powertrains.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the AVs that will change the industry. And it was interesting to see the interaction because as he said that, then Brian reminded him that this is a multi-generational problem. Our kids will be working on it. We probably will never get to true, you know, level 5 anywhere, anytime, any circumstance AVs. So, you know, I like that exchange. So there was a bit of the AVs part of it. And also, the only other non-European or non-Chinese brand that made a lot of noise was Hyundai, who announced the 3-step carbon neutrality 2045 plan. And the day after, they announced the hydrogen wave targeting, you know, 2040, right? So
and kind of foreshadowed like 5 new models, right?
Yeah. So I guess this would be the race in terms of the zero emissions vehicle. So whether it be BEVs or FCEVs going forward, and some companies are obviously putting more weight on hydrogen than others.
Well, Toyota and Hyundai for sure.
Right, and also interesting, Toyota wasn't there, but they had this press conference announcing their plans on investment into EVs, right?
Big number, $13.5 billion.
Yeah, in Japan.
Billion.
Yeah, so you know, you sort of feel the commitment and the tide of change is definitely there, but in actual execution, the Germans are for now they're behind.
Begrudgingly moving forward, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this, so not to gang up on the Frankfurt Motor Show or the IAA Mobility 2021, the North American International Auto Show up until 3 or 4 years ago was
Motorbella.
held. Yeah,
next week or the week after next week.
So Motorbella is actually in my hometown. I grew up in Pontiac, actually. So, and for those who are super old, the Detroit Lions played at the Pontiac Silverdome. I grew up about a mile away from that, and it's not the nicest area and neighborhood in Michigan, that's for sure.
And it looks like Automobility, the LA Auto Show, is still going on in November.
Right. So Detroit Auto Show, and Lei, I don't know if you said you've been.
I've been to quite a few.
Yeah, so traditionally it was in January, in the middle of winter, and very inhospitable time in Michigan for if you were expecting a ton of visitors. So they were going to move it to June in downtown Detroit and have an indoor-outdoor kind of conference or motor show. But because of COVID, they've had to cancel it twice. And this year, instead of having the auto show, they're having this Motorbella at a racetrack in Pontiac. So it's not just these traditional auto shows in Europe, but the North American International Auto Show, which is formerly known as, is also trying to rebrand and reinvent itself. It'll be interesting to see if next summer it does happen. I'm sure it will in some form or fashion, but this should be after the infrastructure bill has been passed and funding has started to trickle in for EV charging stations and subsidies for EV purchase. So I will, hopefully you and I will be able to meet each other before that. But if not, let's aim to meet at next summer's Detroit Auto Show.
Well, with the way Munich is doing auto shows and sort of automobility in LA, I think these international motor shows outside of China, I think they're playing with these different formats.
Right.
I think one of the reasons is they can afford to do so because not that many brands are participating. And if you would try to do this in China, it'll be difficult because you have 100 brands trying to compete for exhibition space in one of these limited halls. And so maybe in 20, 30 years when some brands die, then we'll see this. But it's unlikely to happen in Beijing or Shanghai.
And the reality is the return on investment for these big shows, these booth costs and, traveling and shipping all these cars all over the world, the return on investment is much lower. And now that you can do everything in high definition digitally, and reach a wider audience and not have to share the stage with anyone, why wouldn't you, right? It started, I would say it was in vogue due to Apple and Steve because he was such a charismatic speaker. And it continued into the EV space with Tesla and Elon. And now there's annual events, AI Day, Battery Day. Just like Apple has WWDC, they also have an annual phone day, fitness day. And so I just see less value in these things, except for, you and I, I just remember as a kid going to the auto show and just like seeing all the coolest stuff. But, as a responsible adult now, these cars are like, But, in my experience, I love the auto shows for the fact that you can get to see these new vehicles all at once, right? That's part of it. And the second part of it, I liked, whether it's Geneva or Detroit or Munich, or Frankfurt or any other place outside of China is you can get to talk to these CEOs, pretty easily. You can just go up and talk to them. And this is hard to do in the shows in China because you have to have an extra credential or sort of, relationship. And that's what I liked about the auto shows. Not only the new cars, but the kind of interaction, whether it's official or unofficial interaction, I think is an important part of it. But with the pandemic, it's. And for Detroit, the buzz leading up to the actual auto show and the events, there's a formal dinner, charity dinner. That's a big deal. It just creates a buzz for a city that's been so long kind of struggling, I think.
Yeah, I think Detroit it's way due. I mean, right?
It's turning the corner, I hope. But we'll see. We are at 9:15 late.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I'll mention, the news out of IAA, was all three CEOs, Kalinius, Zipse, and Dees. They said that chip shortage problem is going to extend into next year and possibly 2023. So that's why, I said we're going to have to live with chip shortage and COVID for a long time. That should be the expectation.
I believe I've said this in prior episodes. I've said it in newsletters, prior newsletters for sure. When shortages last this long, they're not a supply issue, they're a capacity issue. And so that's why these chip shortages are lasting a year or 2 years, because we need additional capacity, not because they can't keep up with demand. It's because there's not enough capacity in the system. So everybody needs to get in line in order to get their share of their parts. So Taiwan's probably working on increasing capacity substantially. This means that there's opportunity in the United States to increase capacity. I think Intel has talked about building some fabs in the U.S. China is also working on increasing capacity at 7, 8, 9 nanometer or millimeter, centimeter wafers and stuff like that. And so, to your point, this capacity issue, not supply issue, this capacity issue will probably remedied in the next 24 to 30 months. So yes, we will have to live with it, which means the supply chain teams are going to have to keep on working overtime. But, or they can do like Tesla and say, you know what, the range of your car is going to be 10 miles less. Do you still want it, right? So,
get one with the LFP.
and so one thing I will note, and I wrote this down and we talked about it really quickly, is that ReRide had introduced the RoboVan. So now they're getting into commercial robotaxis or commercial services. And so this is kind of leaning into that whole mobility platform. Now they have a robotaxi, they have a very small robo car, and they just launched a RoboVan service. And so you could look and you will see other companies doing this as well. So
yeah, I mean the robotaxi, the mini robobus, and now the RoboVan. So you can see these AV players look into very specific segments and try to, how their technologies and services can be utilized.
And it hopes to create stickiness on their platform and increase the amount of data that they're collecting.
And speaking of this extension, maybe we shouldn't laugh at what XPeng doing is with the Robo Unicorn. I think, I know you laugh, I laugh, but these new brands, I think this is an important way for them, kind of these, lifestyle products or extension products I think it's one way to test their technology in a way, especially with the Unicorn. I'm not sure if they come with LiDARs, but at least they come with some of the AV technology that from XPeng itself, right? And navigating your house, things like that. So I don't know. I mean, it could be smart.
I think they're trying to encroach on Xiaomi, basically. They're like, you know what? You want to get into cars? I'm going to get into consumer products, right?
It's these silent competitions, right? So who knows?
But then also, so Disney and Apple is very, very good at this. It's getting XPeng's branding into the mind of a young consumer and having that young mind associate XPeng with cool products, right? So Disney's a master at it. Apple, if you go to grade schools in the United States, most of their computer labs or laptops are going to be Macs, right? And that's because they'll make $0 on those computers in order to get their branding into an 8-year-old or 7-year-old. And I do have to say, my moles tell me that was a good get by Ford to get Doug Fields to jump over to Ford.
That was the steal of the century, I call it.
Yeah. So I think there was some controversy that he was getting pushed out, but I don't think that's the case. So unfortunately, I think it has more to say with Apple's mess in their development of a vehicle. So.
Well, I think Tesla is still way ahead. I think so. It will be interesting to see what Doug Field brings, over the next couple of years, how Ford will be changed, from his expertise, the newer products or features that will come out, and that will convince us to say, oh, that was a worthwhile hire. But for now, still, I think, GM in particular, right, they're having issues with the Bolt stopping production with the recall. So that's a disaster.
I think the key to a Doug Fields hire for Jim Farley is you've hired the Michelin star chef or the potential Michelin star chef. Are you going to let him buy his own ingredients, and are you going to let him kind of take over? right? So Doug Fields, I think he grew up in Michigan. He was an ex-Ford employee already, I believe.
Yeah, he started his career at Ford.
Yeah, so he knows what he's getting himself into. And I would have made assurances from the Ford management team to let me do my thing, because he does have experience at Tesla and he does have experience at Apple. So hardware and software is not something that he we believe he knows. If he's survived in those companies for multiple years, then he knows his stuff from a broad set of products and across different types of software. So we're seeing this high level or poaching going on all over the industry. So a good example would be recently the director of the Geely Research Institute was hired by Xiaomi's Shunwei Capital. And this guy is probably going to play a key role in the Xiaomi EV business later on. So, things like that. So go ahead.
No, I'm surprised we covered that many IAA and, in such a...
Yeah, we went pretty deep.
Yeah, pretty fast as well.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.